morning in South Florida. The warmth continues for today, and we are looking at mild conditions to start off. No need to have a sweater or jacket at all, but you'll also encounter some areas of poor visibility, and that's because there are some patchy areas of fog that are forming out there. On the radar, it is mostly dry, but you'll notice more cloudiness to our north, and that is associated with a weak cold front that's pressing down the Florida peninsula. So today we're going to see some periods of extra clouds, but it will be warmer in the afternoon as a result. It's already warming up out there. In the last 24 hours, we're running a good 6 to 8 degrees warmer at this time. It is 68 in Fort Lauderdale, Hollywood at 71, 69 in Hialeah to 68 in Miami, 67 in both Kendall and Homestead. And as we take a tour into the Florida Keys, well, temperature readings here are in the lower 70s. Your full forecast coming up in a few minutes. Morning, South Florida, waking up to partly cloudy to mostly clear skies. It looks really nice outside, but then we're going to see clouds on the increase throughout today, and that's in response to a weak cold front. And on the radar, it's mostly dry right now if your commute takes you around town. So let's get to temperatures. Nice and mild start. We have 68 in Fort Lauderdale and Miami, interior Broward in the 60s as well. 67 in Sunrise, the same for Davie. Pembroke Pines reporting 71, 70 in Hialeah to 67 in the Grove. And then we head south, 68 Homestead, Kendall reporting 67 degrees. More in the way of widespread 70s around the Keys, 71 in Marathon. Isla Mirada reporting 72. Our winds are out of the warmer air direction in response to a weak front that's pressing down the Florida peninsula, and that's why it's been warming up, and you're not going to need to wear a sweater or jacket this morning. It will change gradually throughout the work week once this front settles in. Winds right now veering out of the west southwest. So here's where the front is situated. It's going to cross through later this morning, early afternoon. There could be a spotty shower, but really not expecting much with it. There's really no rain or measurable rain around the state of Florida. So as it crosses through, we are going to start to clear out and temperatures will cool down. It'll be seasonable tomorrow. Then we got a reinforcing shot of cold air that will bring down temperatures below average for this time of year come Thursday and Friday. Your boating forecast calls for a small craft advisory to go into effect this afternoon at 4 p.m. and it's going to run through tomorrow as wind and seas will be increasing. Right now, out of the west northwest 5 to 15 knots, but later on today we can have frequent gusts up to 25 knots. Seas building 2 to 5 feet. Biscayne Bay will be at a light chop to a moderate chop in the Florida Keys with a northerly wind later on as the front settles in. Seas inside the reef building up to a foot. Now the next tide cycle, that is going to be high tide this morning at 8:54 in Miami and at 10:49 in Miami. So today, periods of clouds, mild readings in the upper 70s, and then we move on into tonight. It starts to cool down gradually, but we'll feel that cool down by the end of the week with the return of the 50s. Metro 7 on 7-4. Good morning. Tavares, Olivia, South Florida. So far, waking up to milder conditions. Humidity levels are up a notch, and that's in response to a front that will be crossing through sometime today. Now, we also have reports of some patchy fog around interior areas, so just proceed with caution. There's that possibility that visibility could be poor. And for today, we'll have times of clouds early on until the front crosses through, but we will see peaks of sunshine. Now tomorrow, the cooler air arrives. Now here's a look at the local storm tracking radar to get you out the door. Mostly dry weather underway if it takes you through Broward, Dade, and the Keys, but you could see the extra clouds around the state as the front presses through, and it's not associated with a lot of moisture, so at best just a spotty shower, but overall looking mostly dry. We're running a good 7 to 8 degrees warmer at this time versus yesterday, and it is 69 in Pompano. Fort Lauderdale reporting 68, 71 for you in Hollywood to 68 in Miami. Good morning to you over in Homestead, checking in at 68 degrees in the 70s across the Keys. We have 71 in Marathon to to 70 for you in Key West. And our airflow ahead of the front is out of the south-southwest right now until it crosses through, and then they'll veer out of the north. So temperatures are going to struggle to warm up, but we'll be in the 70s heading into the afternoon with clearing skies. Your full forecast coming up in about 15 minutes. Morning, South Florida. We are waking up to a few clouds, but more will be on the increase throughout the day. So we'll have periods of clouds in response to a weak front. Right now, it's warming up as a result ahead, so you really won't need any sweaters or jackets this morning. It is looking fine on the radar for your morning commute. No rain to report, despite the fact that we have this front pressing down the peninsula. It is 68 degrees in Fort Lauderdale, Miami, 70s for the Keys. And as we zoom on into Broward County, Sunrise reporting 67, same for Davie, 71 in Pembroke Pines. And around Miami-Dade County, we have 70 in Hialeah, 68 in Miami, 67 in the Grove. Heading south into Homestead, looking at 68 degrees there. Widespread 70s in the Keys, 71 Marathon, 70 Cajokie and Key West, with the wind very light but out of the west-southwest due to this front. So we'll continue to warm up a bit throughout the morning, and then temperatures will stay comfortable in the afternoon with these periods of clouds until the front completely settles and the wind starts to veer more out of the north. So overnight, it will actually cool down a bit. It is looking beautiful on Wednesday with clearing skies. And then Thursday rolls around, there will be a reinforcing shot of cold air that will have temperatures below average for both Thursday and Friday as we dip down back into the 50s. Your boating forecast calls for a small craft advisory to go into effect at 4 p.m. this afternoon. It'll run through tomorrow. West-northwest winds now 5 to 15 knots, but we'll see frequent gusts up to 25 knots. Seas building 2 to 5 feet. For the Florida Keys, going between a light to a moderate chop, seas beyond the reef building 1 to 3 feet. And the next tide cycle will be high tide at 8:25 in Fort Lauderdale. So for today, periods of clouds, mild readings in the upper 70s, and then tonight temperatures will actually go down into the lower 60s. Some spots in the western suburbs will be in the 50s, with your extended outlook calling for widespread 50s come Thursday morning. High temperatures in the low 70s. We'll do it all over again Friday. Then we start to warm up, and it'll be seasonable over the weekend with a mix of sun and clouds. That's your 7 on 7 forecast. In South Florida, it is feeling mild, a little more mugginess is in the air just because there's a front that's on the move. But there are also reports of some patchy fog. Now today, there will be times of clouds, and it will be a lot warmer heading into the afternoon in response to a front that's crossing through. So tonight, some cooler air is set to arrive. And here's a look at the local storm tracking radar. Dry conditions if your commute takes you through Broward, Dade, and the Florida Keys. But you can see that there's this line of clouds that's settling into the state, and that's with the front pressing south, approaching Lake Okeechobee. But let's get you out the door and show you what it's like. Temperatures running a good 8 degrees warmer. So we're sitting at 69 in Fort Lauderdale, 69 in Pompano Beach, to 70 in Hollywood, 68 Hialeah, Miami, 65 in Kendall. And as we head south into the Keys, this is where we're finding more in the way of 70s, 72 for both Marathon and Key West. Your complete outlook, that's coming up in about 15 minutes. 60s and 70s, so warmer overall. It is 68 in Miami, 69 in Fort Lauderdale, Pompano Beach to 72 in Key West, with the wind out of the west-southwest 3 to 5 miles per hour, humidity at 96%. So it's higher, letting us know that there's a change in the air, and this is all ahead of the next cold front. On the radar, it is mostly dry. We're not expecting rain this morning, or a lot of it with this front. In fact, we're limited in the moisture department. So this is where the front is situated, right around the lake region. High pressure will be building in on the back end. But with this front, there will be periods of clouds. And as it arrives this afternoon, we'll notice a change into the overnight. And our in-house model run is indicating just that. So we're going to start to cool down tomorrow morning. Instead of the mid upper 60s and 70s, we'll be in the lower 60s and some spots back in the 50s. And then throughout the day, temperatures will climb into the lower 70s with a northerly wind. On Thursday, Friday, a reinforcing shot of cold air builds into the state, and that means it will get colder by our standards for both Thursday and Friday, and temperatures will stay below average. Then we're going to go back to where we should be for this time of year in the upcoming weekend. Small craft advisory starts at 4 p.m. this afternoon as wind and seas increase. It'll run through tomorrow. We have west-northwest winds 5 to 15 knots, but we'll have frequent gusts up to 25 knots. Seas building 2 to 5 feet. Biscayne Bay at a light chop. Light chop to a moderate chop in the Keys, with seas inside the reef building up to a foot. 1 to 3 foot seas beyond the reef. And the next tide cycle will be high tide at 8:25 in Fort Lauderdale, 10:49 in Key West. So for today, we're going to have times of clouds, temperatures anywhere between 76 and 78 degrees. We'll have winds shifting out of the north, and then tonight's lows, lower 60s out west. For Miami and Fort Lauderdale, western suburbs will be in the 50s. And on your extended outlook, South Florida, we'll have cooler air filtering in gradually, but we'll warm up to seasonable values over the weekend, and the highs actually above average on Sunday into the lower 80s ahead of yet another front. And that's your 7 on 7 forecast.
This is a fast track alert.
Patchy fog this morning, but visibility still looks okay. Just keep that in mind, though. It is mild out there, and today it's going to get cloudier in response to a weak cold front. So some cooler air will arrive, but we'll have to wait for that until tomorrow. Right now on the radar, it's mostly dry if your commute takes you through Broward, Dade, and the Florida Keys, so you won't have to worry about rain. The front itself is located around Lake Okeechobee, and that's where we have more cloud cover, but there's not a lot of rain accompanying this front, and that's really a sign that we're not expecting pretty much rain across the region today. Temperature wise, ahead of the front, we're running a good 8 degrees warmer. In fact, it's 69 in Fort Lauderdale, 70 in Hollywood, 68 in Hialeah and Miami, to 66 in Homestead. And as we take a tour into the Florida Keys, well, temperature readings here are in the lower 70s, 72 in Key West. I'll be back with a whole lot more in your local forecast coming up in about 15 minutes.
This is a fast track.
Areas of fog that have formed, especially in West Broward. So we have some lower clouds on the ground, but we also have a front on the move. So throughout today, you'll notice skies turning mostly cloudy. And on the radar, it is mostly dry if it takes you through Broward, Dade, and the Florida Keys. But just proceed with caution if your commute takes you around areas where the visibility goes down. And right now, visibility less than 8 miles in Fort Lauderdale, less than 6 in Miami, to 0 in Homestead at this time. So a sign that fog is forming out there. Currently 69 in both Miami and Fort Lauderdale. Sunrise 68, 70 in Pembroke Pines. So much warmer in response to this front today all around. And it's 70 in Sunny Isles Beach, Opelika 69, 70 for you in Hialeah. Around Southern Dade, 65 in Kendall, South Miami, and also Cutler Bay. Around the Florida Keys, temperature readings here in the 70s, 72 Isla Mirada, Marathon, and Key West, with the wind out of the south-southwest in response to this front that's moving into the lake region. So the front will cross through late morning, early afternoon. We'll have those periods of clouds, but a northerly wind will be setting up shop and increasing to allow some cooler air to filter in. And tomorrow morning, we'll definitely go down to the lower 60s, some spots in the 50s. A reinforcing shot of cold air likely to move in between Thursday and Friday. So we'll be back pretty much in the widespread 50s to start off, which is below average for this time of year. Small craft advisory goes into effect at 4 p.m. as wind and seas increase. It'll last through tomorrow. Right now, winds west-northwest 5 to 15 knots. We'll have frequent gusts building up to 25 knots. Seas building 2 to 5 feet. And for the Florida Keys, there are no advisories. Light chop to a moderate chop especially later today. And the next tide cycle will be high tide 8:25 in Fort Lauderdale, 10:49 for you in Miami. So for today, turning cloudy, feeling mild in the upper 70s. Then tonight, the forecast low for Miami and Fort Lauderdale at 62, 64 in Key West. And on your extended outlook, South Florida will have that cooler air filtering in Thursday and Friday. It warms up a bit over the weekend, but back to typical values. And on Sunday, we'll be following another front. That's your 7 on 7 forecast.
This is a fast track of.
Good morning, and we actually have some fog becoming a bit more dense, and it's moving from west to east. So it's actually made it to some coastal areas like Fort Lauderdale Beach. So yes, proceed with caution if your commute takes you out there and you encounter pockets of poor visibility. But throughout today, we're going to have clouds on the increase because of a front, and that front is set to bring us some cooler air. And as far as the radar is concerned, least of your worries, it should be mostly dry if it takes you through Broward, Dade, and the Florida Keys. Here's where the front is situated, right around the lake region as it presses down the Florida Peninsula. Here's a look at the visibility map in Fort Lauderdale. Visibility less than 7 miles, less than 6 in Miami, and going down even more in Homestead. Currently running a good 8 degrees warmer than yesterday. 69 in Pompano, Hialeah, 68 in Miami, 65 in Homestead. Around the Florida Keys, this is where we've had widespread 70s, currently 71 in Marathon. Your complete outlook coming up in a few minutes. Areas of patchy fog, so make sure that you are prepared to encounter pockets of poor visibility, so drive with extra caution. Right now it is 68 degrees in Miami, a warmer start in Pompano to 69, Pembroke Pines at 71, 72 degrees in Key West with calm to light winds, humidity at 100%. So that's letting us know that there's definitely some fog out there. And as far as your commute is concerned, it is mostly dry, and we're going to expect dry conditions today and into tomorrow. Now here's the big view front moving through Lake Okeechobee. We're going to see clouds on the increase today as a result, and as it arrives this afternoon, skies will gradually clear and the air will get cooler by tonight, with another area of high pressure settling in. So as we look ahead into tomorrow, we'll wake up instead of the upper 60s to low 70s into the lower 60s along the coast. Some spots in the western suburbs will be in the 50s, and then throughout the day, high temperatures alone in the lower 70s. We'll have more sunshine in the works Thursday, Friday. Most models showing a reinforcing shot of colder air, so we'll most likely have below average temperatures by 3-5 degrees in the mornings for both Thursday and Friday, and we're talking about the widespread 50s. Your boating forecast has a small craft advisory going into effect at 4 p.m. It's going to run through tomorrow due to the wind and seas increasing. Right now, west-northwest winds 5 to 15 knots. We're expecting frequent gusts up to 25 knots. Seas building 2 to 5 feet. Light to a moderate chop in the Florida Keys, with no advisories for small craft operators. And at 8:25, that's the next high tide for Fort Lauderdale, 8:54 in Miami. So for today, turning cloudy, feeling mild, upper 70s, and then by tonight, 62 is the forecast though for both Fort Lauderdale and Miami, 69 in Key West. And as far as your extended outlook is concerned, we'll definitely have that cooler air filtering in mid to late week, and then over the weekend we gradually warm up. It should be nice and seasonable, slightly warmer on Sunday, and that's because we'll be following another cold front. That's your 7 on 7 forecast. Please don't go anywhere. 7 News today in Florida. We'll be right back.
Definitely foggy out there, Viv.
Yes, it's foggy, and we also have some clouds building in because of a front that's approaching Lake Okeechobee. So proceed with caution while driving this morning. Some spots visibility may be poor, but throughout today you'll notice those times of clouds, but also an increasing wind out of the north. So that should help some cooler air arrive by tonight. And on the radar, it's mostly dry if it takes you through Broward, Dade, and the Florida Keys. Here's where the front's situated, and you can see these clouds that are starting to settle in, but there's not a lot of moisture associated with this front, so I don't believe we'll have to worry about rain. Visibility less than 4 miles in Hialeah, less than 6 in Fort Lauderdale, down to 0 in West Kendall and Homestead. Temperature-wise, though, we've warmed up a good 8 degrees in comparison to yesterday at this time. So for you in Hollywood, it's 71, 70 in Miami, 66 in Homestead, and it's been in the lower 70s from the middle to lower Keys. I'll be back with a whole lot more in your local forecast coming up in about 15 minutes. Florida, we have some patchy fog, but we also have some clouds starting to build in response to a front. So far, looking pretty good. Even on the radar, it's mostly dry. If your commute takes you through Broward, Dade, and the Florida Keys, we're not expecting measurable rain anytime soon. Now, as far as visibility is concerned, just proceed with caution. We have some lower clouds out there. Visibility less than 6 miles in Fort Lauderdale, less than 4 in Hialeah, and even worse in West Kendall and Homestead. So drive with extra care. And if you do encounter poor visibility, that you use your low beams and watch your following distance. Currently 69 in Miami and Fort Lauderdale, 68 in Sunrise to 67 in Davies, 71 in Pembroke Pines. Then we move into northern Miami-Dade, 60s and 70s here too. We have 70 in Sunny Isles Beach, 71 in Westview, 67 in Doral. Heading south, 65 in the Redlands, 64 in Homestead, with the 70s across the Keys. Islamorada at 72, same for Key West. And the breeze now starting to shift more out of the west-northwest. So we know that we have the presence of the front moving through South Florida. And as it gets here, we will have periods of clouds and the winds increasing gradually today out of the north-northwest. And that should help some cooler air work its way down the peninsula. We'll be waking up to the low 60s tomorrow, some spots in the 50s, highs in the low 70s. But then with a reinforcing shot of cold air, we'll be a good 3 to 5 degrees below average in the 50s for both Thursday and Friday. Your boating forecast has a small craft advisory going into effect at 4 p.m. It is going to run through tomorrow. Seas building 2 to 5 feet. Florida Keys, light to moderate chop with seas at least inside the reef building up to a foot. And the next tide cycle, that is going to be high tide at 8:54 in Miami, 10:49 in Key West. And for today, turning cloudy, temperatures in the upper 70s between 76, 78 degrees. And tonight's lows will be at about 62 along the coast. Few spots in the western suburbs in the 50s. But it gets colder Thursday into Friday. We start to warm up. More average over the weekend, but warmer on Sunday ahead of another cold front. That's your 7 on 7 forecast. Morning, Tavares. Olivia, South Florida. Yes, waking up to clouds, but we've also had some clouds on the ground. So there's a mix from the fog that has formed and also clouds building in from a front. So today we'll see cloudy periods for sure until the front completely crosses through and winds increase out of the north. So that should help some cooler air arrive by tonight. And as far as your commute is concerned, excellent, mostly dry if it takes you through Broward, Dade, and the Florida Keys. But you could see these clouds that are settling in. The front itself is through Lake Okeechobee, so it's already entering into South Florida, but there's pretty much no moisture accompanying it in the mid to upper levels of the atmosphere. So that's letting us know that it will be on the quiet side. Here's a look at the visibility map. Visibility less than 4 miles in Hialeah, down to 1 mile in West Kendall. So we know there's some fog out there. Currently warmer to start off. 69 in Pompano, Miami, 66 in Homestead, and around the middle and lower Florida Keys, it's been in the lower 70s. But I'll be back with a whole lot more in your local forecast coming up in 15 minutes. Looking pretty good. And now last week when we had like a front move through the area, our winds turned out of the north, and a lot of people were wondering what was that haze in the sky, and it's actually from some prescribed burns near the lake region. So here in South Florida, we're going to get a northerly flow once again as a front is crossing through South Florida as we speak. That's why there's the extra clouds. We've also had reports of some fog, and on the radar, at least it's dry. We're counting on it to be mostly dry throughout today. So here's a look at the visibility map. We've seen visibility fluctuating with these lower clouds that have settled in, and right now less than 4 miles in Hialeah. And as far as temperature readings are concerned, much warmer to start off. 69 in Fort Lauderdale, 68 in Sunrise, 68 in Hollywood. Same for Coconut Grove, Hialeah reporting 69, and then we head into Southern Dade. West Kendall reporting 67, South Miami at 68, with temperatures in the 70s across the Keys. Islamorada at 73, 72 in Key West. The breeze already starting to turn more out of the west-northwest, a sign that the front's moving through, and it'll be cloudy at times for sure. The winds increase out of the north-northwest. That should allow temperatures to cool down a little bit overnight, but tomorrow promises to be sunnier. Heading into Thursday and Friday, we're going to get a reinforcing shot of cooler air, so temperatures will be running a good 3-5 degrees below average for this time of year, but a good portion of the area, especially mainland South Florida, will be in the 50s. Your boating forecast has a small craft advisory going into effect at 4 p.m. It's going to run through tomorrow with frequent gusts later up to 25 knots. Seas building 2 to 5 feet. For the Florida Keys, there are no advisories. Seas inside the reef building up to a foot. And the next tide cycle is going to be high tide coming up in a few minutes in Fort Lauderdale and at 8:54 in Miami. So for today, turning cloudy, feeling mild, temperatures 76, 78 degrees. Tonight, cooler air arrives. Some spots in the western suburbs in the 50s, with your extended outlook calling for the 50s to return Thursday, Friday. We warm up ahead of another front over the weekend. That's your 7 on 7 forecast. Just got word from the Weather Service that a dense fog advisory was issued for areas basically west of I-95 and US 1 in Dade and Broward, and it's going to run through 10 a.m. Now, please proceed with caution if you encounter pockets of poor visibility. The fog has actually become quite dense, gradually starting from west and moving towards the coastline. Right now, it is 69 in Fort Lauderdale and Miami. The winds are starting to turn out of the west-northwest, signaling a change as a front settles in, and we will have periods of clouds throughout today and winds on the increase. So it'll be warmer this afternoon, mid to upper 70s for highs, but by tonight, cooling down into the lower 60s. Some spots in the western suburbs will be in the 50s. And then as we move on into Thursday and Friday, we get this reinforcing shot of colder air. Small craft advisory starts at 4 p.m. It'll run through tomorrow for Dade Broward coastal waters, and this does not include Biscayne Bay. And for the Florida Keys, there are no advisories right now, but an advisory may be required by tonight. Next tide cycle is going to be high tide at 8:54 in Miami. So for today, highs in the upper 70s. Tonight, partly cloudy skies, 62 is the forecast though in Miami and Fort Lauderdale. But then heading into Thursday, Friday, 50s in the works. It starts to warm up ahead of another system on Sunday. And that's your 7 on 7 forecast. Dense fog advisory for interior Dade and Broward. So here's a look at the local storm tracking radar. It's mostly dry. Will continue dry throughout today. We'll focus on the areas of poor visibility because all areas west of I-95 in Dade, Broward, into US 1 in Miami-Dade County will be under an advisory through 10 o'clock this morning. Here's a look at the visibility map. Less than 5 miles in Pompano, less than 4 in Hialeah, even worse heading south into West Kendall and Homestead. So make sure that you watch your following distance and use your low beams if you plan on using any sort of lights. Right now it is 69 in Fort Lauderdale, Miami. We zoom on in, uniform readings, but warmer overall. 69 in Sunrise, 71 in Pembroke Pines. And then around northern Dade, well, it is 68 in Miami, 69 in Opelika. And in southern portions of the county, 68 Pinecrest, same for Homestead. Florida Keys more in the way of 70s and warming up to 74. That's the top spot. Islamorada, with the wind already shifting out of the west-northwest as a front settles into South Florida. So we'll have periods of clouds as a result, aside from the fog that's out there. This front will clear the area and allow winds to increase, even more so out of the northwest. So tonight promises to be cooler. And then as we move on into Thursday and Friday, a reinforcing shot of colder air settles in, and temperatures will be running a good 3 to 5 degrees below average, especially in the morning hours. Small craft advisory for the Dade and Broward coastal waters starts at 4 p.m. It's going to run through tomorrow. An advisory may be required for parts of the Florida Keys, with high tide coming up next at 8:54 in a few minutes in Miami, 10:49 in Key West. So highs today between 76, 78 degrees. Tonight's lows in the lower 60s along the coast. Some spots in the western suburbs in the 50s, with your extended outlook calling for cooler air to arrive tonight. Colder Thursday, Friday in the mornings. We warm up over the weekend, and that will set the stage for another front to move in on Sunday. Metro 7 on 7.
All right, Viv, well, some Dunkin' Donuts restaurants in the U.S. are suffering a shortage of donuts.
Nebraska and New Mexico were some that didn't have any on their shelves. Businesses put up.
Expect the rest of the day. Hi, Viv.
Hi there. And gradually we've had fog forming out west, and it's been pushing more towards metro locations. But that, in combination with a front moving in with extra clouds from that's actually caused visibility levels to go down. So satellite imagery showing some clouds have settled in, and we also have those lower clouds on the ground because of the fog. And on the radar, it's mostly dry. We're really not expecting rain with this front, other than a minor cool down. But because visibility has dropped, and we've seen it with our traffic cams throughout the morning, dense fog advisory in effect through 10 a.m. for all areas west of I-95 in Broward, in Miami-Dade, west of 95, and US 1, including the Turnpike. So please drive with extra care, slow down, and if you're going to use any sort of lights, that they are your low beams. So here's a look at the visibility map. Less than 5 miles in Hialeah, less than 3 in downtown Miami, and worse heading south between West Kendall and Homestead. Right now it is 70 in Fort Lauderdale, 69 in Miami, interior areas of Broward in the upper 60s, and we have a mix of the 70s and 60s in northern Miami-Dade, Hialeah at 69. Also for the Gables, heading south, 69 in Homestead. Florida Keys have been in the 70s. I'll be back with a whole lot more in a few minutes. With areas of poor visibility, so hopefully the fog that's out there will soon start to burn off. Currently 70 in Fort Lauderdale, Pompano Beach, 69 in Kendall, Miami, 74 for you in Key West, with a northwest wind 5 to 7 miles per hour, and humidity at 96%. So here's a look at the local storm tracking radar. It's mostly dry. If your commute takes you through Broward, Dade, and the Florida Keys, really don't have to worry about rain. There's a front moving in, but we also have clouds that have developed on the ground, but some lower level clouds associated with a front. So yes, that's reduced visibility out in West Broward, and in Miami-Dade County, we'll have this advisory run through 10 a.m. Here's a look at the big view. We have the front over South Florida and high pressure building in on the back end. So eventually we'll see clearing skies, especially overnight, as the air cools down gradually. And we're expecting lows to go down into the lower 60s along the coast, some spots in the western suburbs in the 50s. And believe it or not, that's pretty typical for this time of year. Tomorrow we'll enjoy more sunshine, and then we'll wait for a reinforcing shot of cold air, and that will have us more in the way of widespread 50s, especially come Thursday morning around mainland locations. Some 50s, 60s for the Florida Keys. Daytime highs will be in the lower 70s, but this will be the case for both Thursday and Friday, as lows will run a good 3 to 5 degrees below normal. Small craft advisory starts at 4 o'clock. It's going to run through tomorrow afternoon, with west to northwest wind up to 15 knots. There could be frequent gusts up to 25. Biscayne Bay light chop, light to a moderate chop in the Keys, with the winds shifting this afternoon out of the north completely. And the next tide cycle, that is going to be high tide coming up at 10:49 in Key West. So for today, Mostly cloudy, feeling mild, mid to upper 70s. Tonight, the forecast low for Miami and Fort Lauderdale at 62, 69 in Key West, with your extended outlook calling for even cooler air. Chillier starts for Thursday and Friday, then we warm back up over the weekend as we watch another cold front. And that's your 7 on 7 forecast.
City of West Palm Beach ringing in the new year with a record number of reptiles. The Cotton Science Center making it into the Guinness Book.
Periods of clouds. We have some concerns for visibility out there, so interior areas of Dade and Broward are under a dense fog advisory at least until 10 o'clock this morning. But then on top of that, we have a front moving in, so we have extra clouds around anyway, and we urge you to be extra cautious while driving this morning as the front moves in. Winds will be increasing out of the northwest, so some cooler air is going to be filtering in across South Florida tonight. Now, a small craft advisory for our offshore waters starts at 4 p.m. and it'll run through tomorrow. Seas building 2 to 5 feet. Right now, Biscayne Bay is looking at a light to moderate chop in the Keys. An advisory could be required tonight as wind and seas increase. Seas beyond the reef right now building 1 to 3 feet. And the next tide cycle will be high tide at 10:49 for you in Key West. So for today, we'll have mostly cloudy skies. Temperatures will climb into the mid upper 70s. And then as we move on into tonight with the northerly flow, we're going to cool down. Lower 60s along the East Coast, interior areas in the 50s, widespread 60s for the Florida Keys. But we'll have a reinforcing shot of cooler air settle in. So more in the way of 50s between Thursday, Friday before we warm back up ahead of another front Sunday. And that's your 7 on 7.
Look at this. A FedEx truck narrowly avoided crashing into a semi-truck.
And a front moving in across South Florida already. So throughout the day, we'll see these periods of clouds. And right now on the radar, just a few isolated sprinkles off the coast with the front moving in, but it's dry. We'll focus on the poor visibility in spots because at least through 10 a.m. we'll have a dense fog advisory for all areas west of I-95 and also the Florida Turnpike and US 1 heading south into Miami-Dade. So at least through 10 a.m. we'll have this advisory. Here's a look at the visibility map. It is very different across certain locations. We have more in the way of patchy fog between Hialeah and Miami, but the fog is more dense heading south into West Kendall and Homestead. Right now, 70 in Miami and Fort Lauderdale, 69 in Sunrise. Davie, good morning to you at 67. Same for Weston. And around northern Miami-Dade, 70 in Opa-locka, 69 in Miami Shores, downtown Miami up to 70, 69 South Miami, Pinecrest, and West Kendall. Florida Keys have been in the 70s. The top spots, that's Marathon and Key West at 74, with the wind out of the northwest already since the front's crossing through. And if we were to draw a line where the front is located, we would draw it right about here since the winds are out of the northwest along mainland locations, but still more west-southwest around the Florida Keys. So here's the outlook. The front will settle in. High pressure will be building in and allow some cooler air to filter by tonight. Now, yes, it's warmer overall, but we will be seasonably cool tomorrow morning. Lower 60s, some spots in the western suburbs in the 50s, and daytime highs in the lower 70s. We're going to get this reinforcing shot of cooler air for Thursday, Friday, where temperatures are expected to drop down a good 3 to 5 degrees in the mornings. Now, small craft advisory starts for our offshore waters at 4 p.m. It'll last through tomorrow. An advisory could be required tonight for the Florida Keys. And the next tide cycle, that's going to be high tide in the 10 o'clock hour for Key West. Highs today in the mid to upper 70s. Tonight, 62 is the forecast low in Miami and Fort Lauderdale. But then heading into Thursday, Friday, more in the way of 50s. We start to warm up over the weekend ahead of another front. That's your 7 on 7 forecast.
Watching Wall Street now, the Dow is up about 180 points at 40.